He said, Luke, sometimes you have to give people what they think they want in order to earn the right to give them what you know they need.
Welcome back to Prosper, everyone. I'm your host, Andreas Whitmer, joined as always by my colleague, Rebecca Teddy. And today, I tell you, we welcome to the show, finally, one of our colleagues and a key part of the Sioka Center, Luke Burgis. Luke teaches entrepreneurship at the Bush School of Business and is an accomplished serial entrepreneur, a popular author and speaker, and is probably best known for his best-selling book, Wanting, which is about mimetic desire and how we come to want the things we want.
Luke, welcome. A warm Prosper welcome. You weren't able to join us at all in the first season for a very good reason, which is that you and your wife, Claire, not too long ago had your first baby. So congratulations. That's the best thing to want and to desire. But we're super glad that you're finally able to join us.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hey, guys. Yeah, it's cool that we get to do this after having worked together for a pretty long time now. And hopefully, if this is anything like our lunchtime conversations, it should be good. And our daughter, Rome, is just turned 6 months. And she's been eating everything she can get her hands on for the last 2 months. And she was 4 months old. Has never met a food she doesn't like. And anything within arm's reach now, she's got her hands on and she's shaking and throwing it. So it means I have to be extra attentive at all times, or she's got her hands in the spaghetti throwing noodles against the wall or something like that if I turn away for 2 seconds.
It's a good problem to have. You're a foodie family. Both you and your wife are foodies. So the girl, of course, your daughter Rome, doesn't fall from the tree, right? Doesn't
fall far from the tree. That's right.
You've spent some time in Rome, and that's probably why you call your daughter Rome, correct?
Yeah. I spent some time in Rome, 3 years actually living in Rome, studying theology. I met my wife in Rome. So yeah, it definitely is a big part of it. And her middle names are Francis and Cecilia, who are both saints that have a connection to Rome. Francis of Rome and Saint Cecilia, who's buried in the catacombs there. So whenever we get a chance to take Rome to Rome someday, it's going to be a cool experience for her. I asked an Italian friend of mine what they're going to call her when she's in Rome, and he said, Roma. She's going to go by Roma.
Roma. It's interesting because the three of us now share this, that we've all lived in Rome. Rebecca, you've lived in Rome, right?
I did. As a student for a semester, and then after graduation, I was there doing some volunteer work for about a year.
Cool. So we got that going for us. The three of us share also the fact that we teach the vocational business together. We just done a workshop together on the Gospel of Work for young Catholic professionals. And we interlock a lot, and we sort of have our areas of commonality, but also our areas of specializations, I guess you could say. But I think, Luke, many people don't know much about your background and the parts where you don't talk often. And we talked about you being a foodie, and I think you've been a foodie all along. You have some entrepreneurial experience early on two things. I think it's always interesting that you were way ahead of the curve on at least two of the companies you did. The one is you were into vending machines before vending machines were cool again. I mean, by a smidgen, you missed that. Actually, you did pretty well, didn't you?
We did pretty well. Yeah. So, I don't know if I would call myself a foodie back then when I graduated from college, because if I was a real foodie, I wouldn't have got into the vending machine industry with packaged goods and chips like that. No self-respecting foodie would ever go into that business. But I was interested in fitness and health at the time. And I started that business a year into my career working on Wall Street. I quit and started the company with my cousin called Healthy Vending was just the name of the company, pretty straightforward. And all we just had the idea to take a very, very old industry, vending, which when we looked into the numbers, we found that it makes a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it hadn't been disrupted in really ever. People were just starting to do some new things like put LCD screens onto the vending machines, but nobody had really thought to put any different products in the vending machines in 2005 to situate everybody in time. So my cousin Sean and I got the idea that we were just going to take the best health foods that we liked, pita chips, granola bars, protein bars, all the things that we found it difficult to find when we were traveling in airports and things like that, and put them in vending machines. And that's what we did. And we branded the machines. We wrapped them with our brand. We used these state-of-the-art machines that had LCD screens on them. At the time in 2005, nobody was doing this. And we went to the National Vending Machine Association conference in Atlanta, Georgia. I will never forget these two guys right out of college. And we were just totally laughed out of the room. I mean, we were trying to get larger vending machine operators to partner with us. Like, these are companies that have hundreds, thousands of vending machines around the country. And we're like, well, if they can just partner with us and, buy some of our machines, we'll make a killing. They just laughed us right out of the room. But we knew that we had something big. And over the course of the next few years, little by little, we chipped away, and we got them into a lot of places, schools, hospitals, office buildings. It's a very difficult business to be in, I will say. For the first year, I literally stocked the vending machines myself, and asked myself, what in the heck are you doing, Luke? Your friends are out there with cool jobs, and you're putting chips into a vending machine and collecting some quarters out of the machine. But we grew that into a pretty thriving business eventually. We had our ups and downs. It took some time. And then I realized that it was a tough business to be in. And I got out and morphed that into another business where we had an online e-commerce company that just sold all of the same products that we sold in our vending machines. And it turns out, the profit margins are a lot higher when you're selling direct to consumer.
So then you finished with that company and you went on, and then eventually you had a reversion and you focused on prayer as well, because I think one of your companies focused on health all around in terms of working out and spirituality through the workout. Is that right?
Yeah, I eventually got there. I started two other companies in between. I started a consumer product called Boom Boom that I imported from Thailand, and it was basically an herbal nasal inhaler that did pretty well. I think it's still out there somewhere. I've seen it in the marketplace. So yeah, consumer product. We had our own line of nutrition products that was kind of a spin-off from that first company. It's funny, all of my companies were in some sense related. One sort of led me to the next one. And as somebody that's been in business for a long time, I noticed that there's usually some thread that entrepreneurs can follow. Maybe their thread is in tech. Mine started out in food distribution, and then sort of led me into tech. And then eventually in my late 20s, I moved that last company, which was the e-commerce company. I moved that company to Vegas, was not really practicing my faith at the time. And in Vegas, within the first month of moving there, I had a very serious kind of coming back to my Catholic faith. Joined a great parish, met a lot of great people, and I just became bored and was not able to find as much meaning in the company that I was running at the time, which is interesting. I think oftentimes we're told in business that you just spot a market opportunity and you meet the need. But if you're not personally connected and you don't find meaning in what you're doing or the thing that you're selling, it's very difficult to sustain your enthusiasm. I know there are some people that can do it. There are some people that are in sales. They'll sell anything and they're really good at it because they just know how to sell. They could sell snow in the winter. They can just sell stuff and they don't necessarily have to be that invested in the product or believe it's going to change the world. I can't, So I think when I had that very serious conversion experience, I just wanted to do something that was moving in the direction that I was going in personally. So I started a company with my friend, David Jack, who was a very well-known fitness professional. He was the face of Reebok for many years. I think Rebecca has at least talked to him before. And he and I started an organization called Active Prayer, which was sort of like Soul Cycle before Soul Cycle, sort of combined whole person wellness. Again, we're very early on this. We're back in 2009 into 2010 when we started that. And, that formed into chapters and various locations all over the place, both in the US and abroad. We were creating a lot of content around, how can we reimagine fitness so that it's not only about the body itself. My business partner, David, always had this great saying. David Jack is jacked. Literally. It's funny that that's his last name. He's about 6'4". He looks like a defensive end NFL player. And, people would come to him, and he's deeply Christian. And people would come to him looking for, whatever, 6-pack abs or bigger biceps or whatever. And he once told me, he said, Luke, sometimes you have to give people what they think they want in order to earn the right to give them what you know they need.
Oh,
And
I
what he
love
meant
that.
by that was they come to me looking for bigger biceps. I need to show them that I know what I'm doing and give them the bigger biceps. And I need to honor that request so that then I have earned the right to have the deeper conversations with them.
That's a great expression. We're going to have to, we're going to have to bottle that somehow. I
Yeah.
love that expression. And it's also, I mean, I've heard experts say that in other kinds of fields, right? The importance of Christians not assuming that because they care more deeply about something spiritual, that they don't have to pay as much attention to just excellence and hitting the mark. But on the contrary, for exactly the reason your friend said, it's important to gain people's professional respect in order to have the right to talk to them about deeper things. I love that crystallization.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's one of my pet peeves to try to cover up or gloss over not being excellent in something with pious platitudes. I've seen that happen before, but we've got to do our work well. And that's the starting point of most everything else.
Isn't it Father Sirico who says piety doesn't make up for technique? So
I like that.
you still got to know what you're doing. Piety itself is not going to make up for that. In a sense, not exactly, but it goes the other way that, the body and the mind are, of course, connected. And what I love about active prayer is that you were early on connecting the two things and telling folks that healthy spirit in the healthy body, and that you can, in a way, just like what we talk, you can make your work your prayer. You can make your workout your prayer as well, and have that be a part of it. No.
Absolutely. Well, in every active prayer gym that we had, our first one was actually in Phoenix, Arizona, because that's where David lived. We had a huge wall called our I Dedicate wall, and people would write who they're dedicating their workout to or for as a form of prayer. That's why it was called active prayer. And by the end of the first year, we had a wall with literally thousands of messages, names of people who were sick, just people that, it's like, if I'm going to do this thing, I want it to have some purpose or some, I'm working out for my daughter so that I can, live a long life and take care of her and so that she can be happy and healthy. And it was just beautiful. So that formed the whole ethos of what we were doing. And it was bold at the time to put prayer in the name of any name, in the name of a company name. It was a way to actually do some catechesis about what prayer actually is as an action or as a living prayerful act, even something as mundane, I guess, as a workout.
Well, this is great stuff, but let's take a quick break before we continue our conversation.
Hi, I'm Father Bob Gall, Director of the Church Management Program at the Catholic University of America. Are you a Catholic layman, woman, priest, or religious running a beautiful school, parish, or apostolate, wrestling with finance and administrative issues you never imagined when you first answered God's call? Are you striving to build something beautiful for God and his people, but need training in personnel management, fundraising, and managing assets in accord with canon law? Well, the Church Management Program at the Catholic University of America's Business School offers a flexible program for you. Our self-paced online programs will help you and your team get the tools you need to see your mission advance, even beyond your wildest dreams. The Catholic University of America is now accepting applications for the master's degree in church management for those aiming to begin their studies in early 2025. One can also enroll in individual courses or pursue one of our graduate certificates. For more details, find us in the show notes for this episode of Prosper or visit our website, meam.catholic.edu. That's meam.catholic.edu.
Listen, we're jumping over. I'm going to ask you to jump way from, Las Vegas and Phoenix and after prayer into some of the work that you're doing right now. Like, how did well, maybe you don't want to answer the question this way, but I'll ask it this way, and then you run with it. How did your dissatisfaction with these series of companies lead you to René Girard?
That's a great question. I recently wrote a book that was published in 2021 about this French social theorist named René Girard, who's had a big influence on my life. He's a French Catholic thinker, and his fundamental idea was that we often go through life unconsciously imitating models, the people that are around us that are modeling not just behaviors to us, but also we catch their desires by contagion. So the things that they want, we end up wanting the same things. And I encountered him in that period in Las Vegas while I was undergoing this huge transformation in the way that I thought about my work and the way that I thought about my faith. And I realized that going back about as far as I could remember to when I was an undergrad at New York University, thinking about going into business, to when I worked on Wall Street, to when I started my first company, that I am just heavily influenced and impressionable, and had taken my goals from the people around me. And in the case of, the startup world that I was in, the goals were often related to starting a company and selling it, and growing it as fast as possible and then selling it. It's kind of like flipping houses. You get into an industry, you get to 1 million annualized revenue as quick as you can, and then you sell the company and you move on to the next one. And I realized that I was doing that because this is the only way of being an entrepreneur that had ever been modeled to me. I'd never met an entrepreneur that in a family business, or somebody that had tried to build something over the long term, like our namesake of the Sioka Center, Art Sioka. Who built something over many, many decades and built a great legacy. I'd never had any encounter with those kinds of people. These are just my friends were building tech products and selling them and going off and doing crazy things or traveling around the world. And that's what I came to want. And I realized in encountering Girard's work, the extent to which I've been influenced by these various models. And I realized that if I really wanted to live a good life, that I needed different models in my life. And I found some in Vegas. One of my good friends, Rick, who was an attorney in Vegas, just had a profound influence on me because I saw the way that he wanted different things than any of my friends did. Things, virtues, things related to his family, his work-life balance. And I thought, I want what that guy wants. And that was my first experience of having a really positive model of desire that would not exhaust me in the pursuit of it, or would not leave me disillusioned once I achieved it.
Interesting you say that, because the experience that the three of us have is we come at things from different angles, but we have a deep connect, like we connect with what we're finding. And here as well, I mean, in the 90s in the software industry, we were always, literally, they called what art would have a lifestyle business, and that's a derogatory term, right? And so it never occurred to me that would be something that you could replace that term lifestyle business with long-term value creation, that you're actually not a flipper. It's like being a house flipper, where you own the house and you actually make it an estate over time, rather than just flipping houses and just fixing them up quickly.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Well, maybe say a little bit more about what Girard tells us about desires, Luke, because it's so interesting. I think many people have the experience. This is even actually what liberal education is meant to do. It's right. It's meant to actually open the mind so that we all learn how to want better, to want more than just material things, even though we're human beings and we have material needs. But so say a little bit more about how, because this is part of your pretty developed theory of even leadership, right? That part of what leadership is having some attention to what we're helping people to want by the way we lead.
Yeah, I've sort of come away from Girard in my own experience believing that education is largely about the education of desires. And like you said, Rebecca, the humanities, the beautiful thing about the liberal arts is that they open us up to all kinds of different desires, and they help us to understand their content and their quality. Otherwise, our desires become very sort of focused and restricted on one particular thing. So in my case, it was, making money and as an entrepreneur in this very specific way. And reading the great books, for instance, introduce us to characters who are, even though they're fictional, they have wants and they have desires. And we learn about the human condition. We learn about human nature. It's why my number one piece of advice for young people in business is actually to read maybe even less business books and more of the humanities. Because if business at the end of the day is about the person at the center of everything, that's one of the best ways to understand what it means to be human. And I think all the three of us do that. Andreas, I know you love to read Tolstoy, I think more than just about anything else. I love to read great literature too. And I often just find myself understanding more about the way that I want to do business by reading some of these things. So I've taken Girard a little bit of a step further, and I've sort of said, okay, there seems to be two kinds of desires. There are thin desires that are fleeting and highly mimetic, the kind that we pursue and then we get disillusioned with them because there's nothing really substantial there at the end. Or there's thick desires, which I would say are God-given desires deeply tied to our vocation, the kind of desires that we sort of are insatiable because there's something infinite there. The desire for the good life, the desire to cultivate virtues, all of those things. And I've realized that there's really no more important quality in a leader, in a business leader, than to be the kind of leader that understands that people are watching them and they're in some sense leading the desires of other people because they themselves are models and what they want other people are going to want. If the leader is greedy and only cares about profit, and guess what? Other executives in the company are going to end up being like that. Or he's just going to hire people that are like that. The greatest leaders have some transcendent dimension to them, and their desires always sort of go beyond the sort of immediate needs to something that's really at the heart of human desire, right? And that's sort of what allows these leaders in these organizations to be great, because there's something real at the end of the rainbow, so to speak.
That's why culture is so important in business, right? Because the culture gets projected in a sense and created by the founder, by the key people in the company. And that is the stuff that we don't, it's not what we write on the wall, but it's what we do on a daily basis, which really shows our character, our deepest desires. And then everybody in the company starts to imitate it, even if it's not required, but people start to imitate what they do. And that's how you get the kind of phenomena like Enron and, the companies that had these great scandals, because this is a reflection, in a sense, of the leader's character or lack thereof, And that's one of the things we, of course, teach in our 118 class. People often say, well, why are we focusing on character in a business class? Well, this is why we're focusing on character in a business class, no? Beyond your book on Girard, what are some other things that, if somebody's interested in that, I mean, he's a pretty complex guy to learn about. How can people go a little bit deeper in this? I know you created some material for the Gospel of Work seminar around this. How can people get a bit more acquainted with it?
Girard has a great book that is approachable. It is readable, called I See Satan Fall Like Lightning, which I highly recommend for an introduction to Girard in his own words, not in mine. I recommend that. And just in the last few years since my book came out, there's no shortage of articles online, including my own Substack, where I've written quite a bit about him in sort of bite-sized chunks. But, Girard he's not saying anything that I think is that novel. A lot of what he's saying, I think we could sort of find in the, perennial philosophy and the Catholic intellectual tradition, about the nature of desire, that it has an end, it has a telos, we have desires, and desires are good. They're not bad. The problem is we don't often understand them, and we don't follow them to the end, and we satisfy ourselves with things that are less than what we were made for.
Two things on that. One is how hopeful what you've just said, Luke, in the course of the last couple of minutes, is for Christians who worry about finding meaning in their work, because leadership is to be understood not only from like who's got the C-suite positions, but there are a lot of people who exercise a tremendous amount of spiritual leadership wherever they are and wherever they go, because they become respected because they might be quiet. They might not necessarily be the most flashy people, but when they speak up, everybody learns to listen because there's something more substantive there. There's something deeper. There will be a different approach. I have in mind a priest friend. He's now been a priest for decades, but I was at his ordination and I was really impressed at the time because around the room, people were giving toasts at this dinner. And every place he ever was, his grammar school, his sports team, his high school, his college, his seminary, his dad's work, there were representatives who had some personal story about how this guy helped them or was a model for them. I think that's something that's very hopeful when we're working, is to remember that there are things we don't even see about the way we influence people. And then, of course, just from the point of view of prayer, part of what we're doing is growing in union with the Lord is to learn to desire the way the Lord Jesus desires, and to let him be the ultimate model for us of the things that we're feeling deep inside.
I think there is
Absolutely.
There is a beautiful connection in what you just said. And something I remember, you recently came up with this description, Luke, that I really loved right away. And you asked the participants, what do you want to want? Yeah, the hopeful part in this is, and this reminded me, Rebecca, and what you just said, to learn, like when Christ says, I come to do the Father's will. We understand desire often in the wrong way, that desire is not only a given. John Paul famously said, love is a decision. At the end, it's a decision. And that fits into what you're saying, Luke. What do you want to want? And what you opened up, and the reason I think why you get such a strong response to this is you're showing people that they can actually be the master of their desires, that you decide right at the end, and that you can understand what is guiding me, and then you can help people realize that, is this what you want? How can you want something else? And then how do you get there? Or what's your advice on this?
I think that's absolutely right. And part of the idea here and the purpose of my work is to help people understand that they have a choice and that they have agency. And I think that there's usually an understanding of our desires that where they're not examined and we take them for granted. I want what I want. I come from this family and my family wants this for me. My family has always done this thing. And there's something almost fatalistic or deterministic about our desires. You want bad things, then you must be a bad person or something like that. But we have a choice to step back. We have an intellect in addition to our desires, and we can think about what's true and good and beautiful. And our desires might not always be aligned with those things, but we have a choice to right the ship and to start pointing them in the right direction towards the right ends. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but it means that we have to take ownership of what we want and of our desires. And sometimes there's times in our life when we realize that what we want is not going to make us happy. And we need to correct and surround ourselves by people that want the kinds of things that we want to want. So I think the question, what do I want to want, is a powerful one. And like you said, Andreas, it does remind me of the Lord's Prayer in Gethsemane, like, Father, may your will be done. We prayed in the Our Father. That's, in a sense, that's saying, I want to want what you want for my life. And I want to live my vocation. What do you will for me? And I think if we approach our work every day with that mindset, it challenges us to constantly examine our desires and not just settle for the needs of the day, but to constantly be looking towards a higher end.
Luke, one of the things we love to ask our guests is about their favorite business books at this point. This is about principled entrepreneurship, so we're excluding our own books here. But have you read any books that, in your view, have to do with business that have had a great impact on you? If you would give somebody a 1, 2, 3 list or so, what's on your night table to read? Although with Rome around, you're not reading something before you fall asleep, I think.
I'm not, and most of the books that I'm reading are books that I need to read to write my next book. And one of the most challenging things about writing a book is that you're a bit limited in terms of what you can read. I don't have the luxury of reading War and Peace right now, even though I wish I did.
It's like going to school, right? During school, you don't get to read what you want to read.
Exactly. Yeah. There's only so much time in the day.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, Luke. So tell everybody about what's next for you. What are your next big projects, and what's this book you're working on?
So I'm working on a book right now called The 1 and the 99. Subtitle is sort of to be determined, but it's about the relationship between individuals and groups. In some sense, every human has a fundamental drive for togetherness, to be together. And we simultaneously have a fundamental drive for differentiation, right? We want to be individuated selves and to not just be swallowed up in a group. And this is a question that's fascinated me my whole life as a fairly rebellious teenager. And I'm going to be exploring that. I don't set out to write a book with the answer already in mind. I write the book because I'm trying to work out the answer in the process of writing the book. So a lot of and this is related to mimesis, right? Because when we're in crowds, there's this tremendous pull on us. And people that don't have a strong sense of self can lose themselves in the crowd. If they don't know who they are, they'll tend to just get swallowed up in whatever environment that they're in. And which brings me to the book that I'm reading right now, which I think has everything to do with business. It's a galley copy of a book that's not quite out yet, but by the time people hear this, it probably will be. I was asked to review this book. It's called True to You, A Therapist Guide to Stop Pleasing Others and to Start Being Yourself by Dr. Kathleen Smith. And I'm reading it because it has to do with my new book. And I do think that leaders need to have a sense of who they are. And that can be difficult. And in this book, in the sort of theory that she operates out of, which is Bowen theory of family systems, there's a pseudo self, which is the part of ourselves that is constantly trying to negotiate everything at every moment. Everything's sort of an existential crisis. We don't stand on any solid ground. We're just constantly negotiating with our pseudo self, and it can be exhausting going through life like that. And then in opposition to the pseudo self, there's a solid self, and that's the part of ourselves that has solidity to it. It's kind of like the thick desires that I spoke about earlier. We all have a bit of a pseudo self and a solid self, and it's not that the solid self doesn't change, but when it changes, it just changes more organically. It doesn't sort of change in a negotiation with the culture or whoever we happen to be speaking to, right? We can say, I believe something, I stand for this, and we can own that, right? This is what I believe. Thomas More is, very famously did this, right, in his trial. He spoke as a subject. So the book is fascinating because it talks about the influences on us and how we can be a solid self in any environment that we're in. And so often, this was my problem earlier in my business career as an entrepreneur. I don't think I had much of one. And I just sort of became a product of the people that I was around. So when it comes out, it's very good. I would recommend giving it a look.
Before we dive into this really deeply, which I hope we can do next time, I think we should probably wrap up. But I want to give you a few moments to, here at the close, to let you say how people can get in touch with you, maybe how they can get on your Substack and follow the kind of stuff that you're doing in real time.
Yeah, well, if you're ever in Washington, D.C., you can find all three of us, actually, in the Sioka Center. But you can follow me online at lukeburgis.com. My newsletter is there on that website. It's read.lukeburgis.com. And I'm on all the social media platforms for better or worse. Yeah. So, and I love to engage with people there.
So that's our time for today. I'm glad, Luke, thank you for you to finally be here with us, although you had a very good excuse not to be. And I hope this will only be the first of many times that you come back. And Rebecca, with the three of us, this is like day lunch at the Sioka Center, isn't it? So thank you both.
It absolutely is. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you very much for having me on, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. I look forward to the next conversation.
We always just get going right when it's time to wrap up, which I think you warned us about. But nevertheless, we're trying to keep down to our at least below 40 minutes.
We're just giving people a desire for the next episode.
This is good. This is good. So thank you. And thank you, listeners, for making time for us today. As a reminder, we invite you to visit our show notes for links to the items we discussed. And we invite you to enroll in our free online course, The Gospel of Work, at www.siokacenter.com. If you enjoyed this conversation, we hope that you'll spread the word. It really does help if you subscribe to Prosper in your favorite podcast app and like us and give us a good review. And visit our social media accounts to leave feedback and engage with our growing community of listeners just like you.
That is it. Take care. Until next time, we hope you prosper.